So, hey, everybody, thank you so much for coming back to another episode of Physical Therapy Private Practice Secrets of the Top 10%. My name is Brian Gallagher. I got a great show for you guys this week. I have got Mike Dwyer from Prompt. This is a very hot topic in today's world of high tech and clinical efficiencies. You have to be working with the best EMR systems out there. I am not saying that because I have a person on my podcast who does something super good and super great that everybody else is super bad. I'm not saying that. I was just having this conversation with Mike. But when people ask me, like, if you were doing it, where would you go? I would be here for reasons that work for me. And I think that working with thousands of you owners across the country, everybody has particular reasons why they pick and choose the things that they pick and choose. I'm hoping that you get to get a little inside look into Prompt, a little inside look into the culture of the company. Obviously, the person behind the culture of the company, the CEO, Mike Dwyer. I think most of us out there have now come to the realization that we're going to do business with people that we know, like, and trust. Most people can have very good performing things, but if you have a company that stands behind its product and is innovative and genuinely cares about your success, because your success is their success, I think you're going to really find yourself aligning with what we're going to be talking about here today. So, Mike, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I am honored and I am very grateful for your time. You're a super busy guy. You are in a new office. You must be over the head with things to do.
Right. I'm so excited to be here. My first ever podcast was with you. I don't know if you remember that.
Was it? Yeah, that's cool. I didn't know that.
We barely had a product. It was like the first 2 weeks of being launched. And yeah, it'd be fun to look back on that one after we hop off this, compare and contrast.
That's funny. That's really funny. I didn't know that. And here we are, it is in my nature though, when I find people that I really gel with, I really align with both, professionally and personally. I'm like in it for the long haul. So it doesn't surprise me. Like, I'm a very loyal person in that regard. So, I think a lot of people tune into this podcast. And for those of you listening, please click like and subscribe and hit all those bells and whistles down there. It does help the algorithm and does help me to reach out to more people. So, my marketing team would kill me if I didn't put that in there. So that does help, though. It really does genuinely help if you like the content that we have. So moving on to our conversation and discussion, getting the admin out of the way there. Mike, I think the profession of physical therapy, just from my take, is a little bifurcated in a way, right? I think there's a margin of people that are just in a race to the bottom, right? Give me the lowest cost, give me the most you can give me for the least amount of money out of pocket. And then I think we have another margin of people that are like, you know what? Of course, I don't want to overspend on anything, but I'm looking for value. I'm looking for things that are going to make my life easier, that's going to give me a better life experience, that's going to enable me to have work-life balance, not just for my employees, but for me as an employer. And I see that in my business. I see, we do a virtual front desk, and we have highly trained, highly qualified, very expensive staff, not very expensive, but good, high price staff, well compensated staff, because we can acknowledge the skill set that they bring to the table. Are you seeing that as an EMR software company as well? I mean, we're a service company. You're would you say you're more of a product company in that regard?
100%. We're a product company, and getting the best people to help build the product is instrumental in my business. And it's the same deal with yours. I mean, the people make up the brain power that builds the product, and the customers interact with that every day with our team. So 100%.
All right, good. So, well, I think that's what we have. I think we have to satisfy both groups to a degree, but to a certain degree, I think you would agree, maybe you would agree, I think you would agree, that we can't be everything for everybody. And I'm not even trying to be. I'm really just trying to be that person who can get people to practice at the top 10% of their license and have a very viable, expanding company that is in the best interest of everybody involved: staff, patients, community, owner, and group, company group.
Yeah, we learned that over the years. I'm like, whenever someone gets in front of us, I'm like, they should be at Prompt EMR. But I've learned over the past few years, it's not for everyone. Like, you have to pick as a clinic owner what's important to you and align that with your vendor, just how like we're aligned as partners.
Yeah, that's how we work together too. And I like the fact that we're not trying to be that, because I think people then they get salesy, they're trying to sell everybody. Everybody's got to get sold. And that's what I like about your group. I love hanging out with you guys at PPS, and we did a wonderful PPS event together this year. That was such good fun. And I hope we can continue to pull those things off. Let me ask you some of the questions. I'm going to kind of wear the hat, if you will. I'm going to try to switch roles here. So for all of you listeners, your PTs, PT owners, clinical directors, managers, whatnot, I'm going to try to be you for a minute and throw some questions at Mike, and let's get some answers out here on out here in YouTube and in the podcast that you may be looking for. By all means, I can't hit all of them. You're just going to have to reach into prompt and just sit down and go through the system and learn all about the particulars. But let me see if I can get some of the broad strokes out of the way. So Mike, if I'm looking at this company and the people behind the brand is what really matters to me, because I believe whenever I sign up with anybody, I'm not signing up for the brand. I'm signing up for the people behind the brand. I'm signing up for you. I'm signing up because of you and Adam and Tim, all of you guys. What made you even want to create an EMR software in the PT space? Like, why did you do it? What brought you to this point in time that you actually, what brought you to that point in time where you actually made the decision, we're all in, we're doing?
It's kind of a journey. So I was a patient for 5 years. I had a slap tear twice on my shoulder, and then I had external compartment syndrome on each leg from being a triathlete. And what initially frustrated me with care was I had no way to visualize or track my progress. Why that was important to me is being a patient in PT, you're there because something's wrong. You want to get back to doing what you were doing prior. So Adam and I, we created an app to tell a patient, you're here today. You have X% more room to go before you get back to what you wanted to do prior. And at the time, plan of cares were one of the biggest issues. I think the stat is 3 out of 10 patients finish their plan of care. So for a patient, it's good to be able to see this is how much more room you have to go. For the owner, it was good because, hey, you're losing all of these visits from patient self-discharge. So we took that product to market, and not one person wanted to buy it. And from there, we went on the drawing board. And everything, when we did research in the space, we found that patient engagement was a problem, but the bigger problem was the operating systems in the clinic. So what got everyone super excited, specifically on the engineering side, was going into a practice, seeing the layout of how the technology was interacting with everyone, and then going into a billing office and seeing similar workflows. And that was kind of the light bulb for everyone to like, all right, there's a problem. We have the expertise to solve it. Let's do it. Long-winded answer, but
no, that makes total sense. No, I mean, find a need and fill it, right? Find a need and fill it. Were you always like into, technology and software and hardware? Were you always like kind of in that arena?
No, I mean, I started this in college. Yeah, I love working on with tech, but it's like I didn't see my path going into technology out of school. I originally wanted to go into a finance career. And then senior year, I kind of had that existential crisis. Like, what do you want to do with your life? Do you remember that from your senior year of college? Did you know exactly what you wanted to do?
No. I knew I wanted to be in the industry of helping people. Like I was like an athlete and played sports, and I was thinking like school psychologist or medical doctor. I actually went to pre-med before I flipped over to PT. So I kind of knew like what brought me joy. I kind of know, helping others, like literally helping others, like having others turn to you and say, hey, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for what you did for me. That kind of help. Like I wanted that. I wanted to have that kind of effect. So, but I didn't know where I was going to go for it until one day I walked by the PT office. Music was playing, people are running, hopping, and jumping, and then 2/3 of the people in there were women. And I'm like, what am I doing out here with all this guy? Like, why am I out here? I'm going. I mean, I'm just being honest. I was 20, 21, 20. I wasn't even 20. I was like 19, 20, and I'm like, I'm in. Sign me up. I'm going to be a PT. So that is pretty much that simple. But once I got in and I understood, like I could educate people and it'll last a lifetime. I can treat them and they don't ever have to suffer that pain and discomfort or dysfunction again. I was like, wow, this is changing lives. And I never looked back.
So similar in a sense, like for me, it was an aha moment, like PT works. It was such a pivotal part of my life. And I'm like, I could stay motivated to this. So I wanted to be involved in some way, patient engagement, and then now EMR.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I know it's been a journey from that point when you started to this point now. Give me an example. Give the group an example of like something you guys had a barrier you had to overcome, some massive pothole you fell into and you had to dig yourself out of, or people like to hear a little bit of that life journey. Like, let me just say this. It wasn't all rainbows and roses and unicorns all the way through this process, right? You ran into something along the way. I know I did. I know there was a time in my life I was in debt 85,000. I was losing $5,000 a month. And it was my wife who came to me and said, taking another Con Ed course isn't going to make this a better business. You have to make this a better business, not becoming a better PT. And that was the turning point for me. That's when I went on the pursuit of what are the missing ingredients to successful private practice that I never got in PT school. And then I stopped falling off the cliff. I stopped running into brick walls that I didn't see coming. Did you have any similar experiences to that?
For me, it was we launched our product right into the start of COVID. We learned from a business standpoint, we didn't pay ourselves for over 2 years, which I'm sure you can resonate with that.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And then from a product standpoint, like we had to launch telehealth. We didn't charge our clients any money. I mean, it was an opportunity in the sense people had time, but everyone was trying to figure it out. And we were too. So it's kind of that, oh shoot moment, like your back's against the wall. You have to figure it out. And it jump charged everyone on the team.
Yeah, no, well said. Well said. As a result of that, you've made adjustments, you've made advancements. If someone's looking in at, again, I'm being a PT owner at home listening to this, I'm on the treadmill. What makes Prompt different than the competitors? Like different enough that I should look, that I should call you, that I should look at what you have to offer. Why would I leave whatever system I've been on for 5 years? What would you say? Maybe it's just the feedback of what your clients tell you, or maybe there's something that you specifically want to mention.
I think two things. I think it's the financial impact of Prompt. So the stat, we take when a client comes to us, their pre-prompt and then their post-prompt data, and we compare it. And the average practice on Prompt made extra $32,000 per provider last year from their baseline with no new net change in labor. And I think why that's important specifically now is you have revenue getting pressured with reimbursement going this way, and then you have expenses going this way. So you have to find a way to curtail expense and maximize top line. And that's really what we're focusing on. And then I think next, just how we think of building product and how fast we move the product. So technology moves fast. And I think why people love working with us is every month the product is getting better in some way. In 2023, we launched 2,300, no coincidence to 2023, feature requests given by customers, which I'm super proud of. And how we look at product, I think, is quite unique. There's 5 users in a practice. There's the patient, there's the provider, there's the admin, there's the biller, there's the owner or management. We try to build for those 5 users. I think if you look at the market, systems are either geared more on the clinical side or they're more geared to the billing and admin side. I don't think there's been a player to holistically tie it all together in a cohesive way, automated way, like us. Granted, though, I'm slightly biased because I started it.
Well, I think it's evident with the people that use your platform. I mean, the feedback we get is the automation and the continuous innovation is meaningful. I mean, it's not just stuff that you guys want, it's the stuff that your clients want. It's the stuff that your members want and you deliver. You deliver. However different you've been able to find your way through this, that you don't get tied up in some big bureaucracy. You actually make swift decisions and you actually act in a nimble manner in the best interest of your clients. That's what we hear. We're a billing service provider, right? We've got billers in 37 different states. And so we bill for 5 or 6 different EMR companies. You're by far our leading client, and there's a reason for that, right? And so my billing staff, when I survey them, hey, if you had your preference of one system over another, what system would you prefer to be on all day? Then they'll tell me prompt. So I'm just saying that. I mean, it's not because you're on my podcast. It's literally the data points that we get. We literally survey our staff. That is what they tell us. So there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. The number one problem that people are typically trying to solve, they'll seek out the solution for. When people can get their arms around what's my number one challenge, I don't like to use the word problems in my life or in my business. I think life is just full of situations, and it's my job to navigate through the series of situations. But when I can get my arms around the number one situation or the number one challenge, whatever you want to call it, problem, barrier, whatever, I go on the hunt for the solution for that. You must hear it too. Like, if people come to us, it's like, Brian, we've got to stop the payroll being over 60% of GI. It's way too high. How do your virtual front desk services help us with that? How do your billing services help us with that? So I know what it's like when people are coming in asking us, what are you hearing? What's the number one problem people are voicing to you as to why they're seeking you out, why they're looking for your product?
I would say staffing is the number one issue I'm hearing across every practice. Whether that's getting more front office billers or retaining their therapists and recruiting new ones, it feels like it's all revolved around staffing. Right.
Interesting. I would have thought you would have said revenue, because you very accurately pointed out the income squeeze. The income squeeze, by definition, is any business or industry in which the revenue generated by the services or sold is growing at a pace slower than the costs for operating that service or product. And that's exactly where we are right now in physical therapy. In physical therapy, the income earnings for the services that we're delivering is not even growing. It's at a rate or flat or lower than the increased cost of doing those services. So people are looking to solutions for that income squeeze. You kind of mentioned that earlier, but you're also saying people are coming to you saying, Staffing how? They're trying to use a system that's more automated so they can do the same volume or more with fewer people. Is that what you're seeing?
I think it's retaining, like, a lot of the groups I'm talking to have lost therapists over the past year to 2 years and
clinically,
or having struggle recruiting new ones. So From what I'm seeing, supply is pretty high in most clinics. The patient volume is there if you're an established clinic. It's just letting that disperse out because you don't have the staff to handle it. But I mean, the profit squeeze is a close number 2 of what I'm hearing recently on meetings. It's everyone's trying to find an edge when, PT is a 10 to 15% margin business typically, and it doesn't have to be that. So
no. Does not have to be that. I think our best clients at 38% profit. It's all about, using advanced technology in the hands of highly trained people. I think when owners listen to a podcast like this and they start learning, like, oh, I should be putting my efforts into acquiring the most advanced technology available to me and placing that in the hands of the most highly trained people so that I get the greatest gains and benefits from that. I think that's why our two companies work together so well. We put so much training into our staff. like ongoing training, and you put so much into the development of your software and your product. And I think those two go hand in glove for sure.
Well, it's like you said that out of a P&L, 60 to 50% of it's staff related, like salary.
Well, out of a pay, like one of the stats that owners need to track is what is the percent of payroll to GI, to their monthly gross income. And in the quota is what you can't live past. You've got to be under 60%. You've got 60% of the dollars going out the door that come in the door have to go to pay. Now, the goal is to be under 50%, like to be in the 50s or under 50% is your targeted goal. When my physical therapy practices that work with us in Megacan, they can get their payroll as a percent of GI under 50%. Their biggest cost is now at a very doable margin. It's at a very livable pace, but they're not doing that. They're not achieving that if they're not using advanced technology, using, a progressive PT practice model where you're outsourcing highly skilled services. They just aren't doing it because their payroll is just going to be too high.
When your salaries are 40 to 50% of your gross income, how can you not make those people as efficient as possible? So, I mean,
yeah,
I would change. I would change my answer to number 2.
but you hit the nail on the head when it comes to staff, because the reality is there's not enough PTs to meet the needs. There's going to be 15,800 new PT positions opening up, according to the latest journal article I just read just last week, for the next 10 years. So for the next 10 years, there's going to be an opening of 15,000 plus PT positions every single year for the next 10 years. So, groups like us, we kind of, I believe, reason why we're very busy and we're growing is because we solve that problem. They need to be able to see, who they need to see with fewer people, fewer dynamic. And if I'm a new grad and I'm looking for a position, I'm going to look. If I come into a clinic and they don't have a state-of-the-art EMR, that means more work for me. That means later nights for me. That means taking documentation home for me. I'm not taking that job. So staffing indirectly by having economical systems, you're going to attract the best and the brightest, and you're going to retain them because they don't want to go work for the people that are using platforms that are out of date, clunky, taking so long to get their darn documentation done. And it's not working for them. I know so much. That brings me to my next question. Share with the people who are listening, what do you have in your system that is working for them in that benefit? Whether it be, CMR or, just whatever bells and whistles and features would you share that you're like, yeah, we knowingly put this into the system to aid you in this way?
I think it's a few things. So on the scheduling side, it's how do we keep the schedule full? And we have a tool that tracks the plan of care for every patient to make sure they're adhering to that plan of care. So if Brian wants me in twice a week, I'm only scheduled once, red flag. And the system will text and email to get you back onto the calendar without playing phone tag with that patient. Awesome. The feature that ties well with that is the waitlist filler. So any vacant space in the calendar, it will try to match that with people that have identified they want that time. And they also need it because they're not scheduled right.
And you don't need a human being for that. The system's going to seek that out and propose a suggestion.
Correct. Without you touching a thing and just filling slot. Really kick ass. Pardon my French.
No, that's cool.
On the clinical side, it's having the intake populate as much of the eval as possible. And what we're trying to do with the intake going forward is pre-filling the goals, assessment, care plan based on what the patient is self-reported. Because once you can get to a diagnosis through the intake, you can start pre-filling all the goals, all the stuff that takes time in the note. And on the billing side, it's just having billers work on what requires their attention. So one of the best features is our auto poster, which will get rid of the paid full claims, the claims that don't need skill, and just tease out the problems, which are very few with all the protections on the front end to make sure clean claim goes out the first time. The stat I'm really proud of there is 96% of claims on prompt leave clean meaning you're only touching 4 to 3% of your claims in the back end.
That's a fantastic stat. And as a billing company, I can tell you that stat means the world to us. And the other thing is that auto posting. That is super beneficial for a group like us where we have 120 some billers, and we keep growing, so I can't give you an exact number on that. But I will say this too, from a clinician point of view. As a clinician, we often encourage and educate and train owners to have a work environment where if their therapists are seeing 11 patients a day, 12 patients a day, 13 patients a day, all depends on how they do their schedule. Most clinics in America are between 11 and 14 visits a day. You get that Northeast and numbers change, and you get to the Pacific Northwest and numbers change outside of those ranges. But 90% of people are between 11 and 14 visits a day. Well, here's the thing. As a therapist today, in today's world, I want to walk out of my practice. I want to walk out at the end of my full day of treating within 60 minutes of the last patient that walked out the door. Within 60 minutes, I need to be walking out. And I know other systems that's very cumbersome, but within your system, it's not. And I don't want to put you on the spot to give an answer as to why that is. I will speculate why I think that is, because I'm not a treating therapist, so I don't use the system in that regard. But from the people I speak to, I'm going to speculate it's in part because you allow massive customization of the notes and the templates, so I can actually have everything formatted the way my brain thinks, the way I go through my eval, my progress note, my revisit. And you also allow me to copy and paste when appropriate. I can actually move things forward when I'm just moving from session to session and just make the adjustments that are pertinent to today's session. So those are my two, impressions that I get from the clients using it. Do you have anything to add to that? Because I think as a therapist listening to this, this is a very important effect or result that I would be looking for.
It's the templating, and it's not documenting anything that's not required on the note. So keeping a fair, teaching your team on compliance and what's required and nothing more than what's required, regardless of the EMR, will benefit you. Because you don't need to write Brian Gallagher has took 4 breaths on this podcast. You don't need to write that type of stuff. You have to write the impairments. I can get into each one. And then, yes, carry forward helps, but it's really just templating per diagnosis. And you should have your notes out same day. The average on prompt is 0.8, meaning the visit's being started, documented, sent to the payer in less than 24 hours for our entire user base.
Yeah, I mean, the way we run it when I'm training owners, for those of you who are listening and you do a whole day's worth of work on a Tuesday, all notes need to be in the system and logged in by 9 a.m. the next day. And all those visits from prior day that were logged in by 9 a.m. today are out the door by 2. So we like to have you treat all day on a Monday. Notes are all locked down by 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. Billings out the door by 2 on a Tuesday for Monday's visits. And that's how we like to roll. And so we always lean into systems that do that. Let's be honest with people. I often feel a great degree of trust when I'm seeking a service or a product, when someone can tell me the pros and the cons. There's pros and cons to everything. I always feel like I'm being sold if someone's just telling me all the roses and all the fair weather things about what they have to offer. Even with Meg Academy, pros and cons. Pro, you're going to get 4 times what you spend back typically in year 1. Con, you have to spend the first deposit to get going, right? Or con, you have to invest 2 hours a week and get through the program in 3 months time, right? And 3, maybe 4 months, depending on how good of a student you are. And then you have to apply and you have to do role play. You have to do something. Look, if you're just going to sit back and just think you're just absorbing YouTube videos, Meg Academy is not for you. So that's like my answer to pros and cons. My job is to increase one's skill development and their application of what they're learning. That's why our training platform mimics PT school, education, duplication, application. So that's my 30-second pitch of there's pros and cons to working within just Meg Academy, if you will. What would you say pros and cons that come along with somebody who's going to flip over from one EMR to prompt?
I would say it's one and the same for updates. So pro, we're listening to the customers, we're updating based on that feedback monthly. The cons is it's very easy to fall behind. I was just in an office last week and they've been with us for 3 years and they weren't aware of 5 things that would have changed their life in the system.
Ah, gotcha.
So what we've learned, and we track this closely, if you're using 6 out of the 10 features in your role, you'll be happy on prompt. If you're using less than that, you'll not like us. So
Yeah.
we try to get everyone above 6, but the nature of change and rapid iteration is you have to stay on top of it or else you'll just miss, crucial things.
See, isn't that like what we were talking about before we got onto this podcast? Before we hit record, everybody, Mike and I were having a little conversation with Rachel, and we were talking about coaching versus consulting, right? And Mike's pointing out, like, if you're going to be successful in anything you do, you kind of have to meet halfway. You have to meet it. Like I totally relate with what you're saying, Mike. Meg Academy is on Meg 6.0. For anybody who came in on Meg 2.0 and you're just like, oh, I know that very well, but you're not taking advantage of the new, because we're constantly evolving, constantly adding, constantly equipping people with more tools, more materials, more, higher advanced technological application of things, right? But if they're not using that, well, then they're like, oh, what am I getting? I'm not getting, well, you have some responsibility here too. You got to put the time in and the effort in, and you got to commit. You got to be all in. You got to be like, go big or go home. So people will say to me, prompt's expensive and it costs me money. And I'm like, well, it's not free, but have you looked at the cost to return ratio? Because the definition of cost return is value. You shouldn't be, in my opinion, for those of you listening, I don't think the cost of things is where you should really focus. I think the value is what you should focus on. The value combines the results, the return of the advancement, the gains in correlation to what you spent for it. So, Mike, would you share the same thing? I mean, do you feel like that's like sometimes it's a con because people are too focused on the dollar amount on the page and not the value gain, the value added gain they're getting for it? Is that somewhat of a lift sometimes?
We are certainly, I would say, a little bit more than most of our competitors, which definitely can be a barrier if you view EMR as a commodity.
Yeah.
I mean, it touches every part of the practice and has the opportunity to make every single user that I described earlier, those 5 users, more efficient. You just have to calculate what that is worth to the practice. And something I've been pointing people to is you're already paying for an EMR. Most people aren't on pen and paper EMR anymore. So say the cost of your current EMR is $1 and prompt is $1.20. Is prompt going to help you make up that 20 cents?
Right.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
By a factor
Definitely.
of 10 plus.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just in Seattle and I gave a talk out there to the private practice special interest group, and there was about 100 owners there. So shout out to that group. It's like one of the nation's best organization of private practice owners in the country. I mean, I'm honored every time they ask me to come out and speak with them. And when I was speaking out there and we were focusing on virtual front desk in regards to this conversation, to your point, I was like, look, focus on the total cost of that service on an annual basis. So you can say to yourself, well, I'm spending $40,000 or $45,000 or $48,000 a year staffing my front desk, organically with somebody in my neighborhood who shows up every day. I'm going to go to virtual front desk and maybe I'm just hypothetically, everybody don't hold me to this. Maybe I'm spending $50,000, maybe $55,000. So maybe I'm spending $10,000 or $15,000 more per year. And then unless you jingle back and remind them and say, okay, so now let's factor in the sick, the holiday, the vacation, the lack of authorizations, the missed verifications, taxes, insurance, FICA, payroll, all of that. And then they're like, oh, And also let's remember the calls at 6 a.m. when somebody calls out sick and you got to scramble and someone's got to call, or the turnover cost of 23,000 a year just to get another person. I think when I look at Prompt, you plug so many operational holes, you create such a level of economy of scale, like such a degree of efficiency for the people who are working in the practice that it really pays for itself in terms of having the premium product. I'm just saying that because that's what I hear from our clients and that's what my billers tell me. But am I wrong? I mean, do you not hear that? You talk to people every day.
I mean, that's the pitch. Like most EMRs work.
Right.
They just don't work at the level Prompt does.
Right.
And in a game where you're looking for small edges, I mean, I'm biased, but I think Prompt can give you a big edge financially, but also making your team happier. Because if people just had to treat patients, talk to patients, and not deal with the admin, all the other parts of managing the practice, they'd be pretty happy. So we're trying to get people to focus on why they got involved in the first place, just to help people.
You're so right about that. And look, there's room at the top. There's room at the top for more people. If there was another EMR system that's showing me the same outcomes, the same benefits to PTs around the country, the same economy of scale, they'd be on the podcast talking with me too. I mean, I have no problem, and you understand that, Mike. My job is to bring to the masses of people things that work, things that are going to win and benefit them greatly, and let everybody stand on the merits of their own accomplishments. I tell that with people who reach in for our services too. We may not be the fit for you. We may not be the perfect peanut butter and jelly sandwich that you're looking for. Maybe somebody else is making a better sandwich and you should go there. And I'm not going to have hurt feelings for that either, because we have to do the best job we can within the ethical standards that we practice in. And that has everything to do with all the components: price, performance, results, satisfaction, work-life balance, all of that. We're trying to give people, at the end of the day, I think, and I'm going to end with this, I think we're trying to give people greater degrees of freedom. Freedom, by my definition, is one who can live their life with economic stability while having time flexibility. If you have those two things together, you're living a life of greater freedom. You need software. You need some EMR billing software program. Look at the ones that are actually the most innovative and the most advanced, because they're going to move you closer to freedom. So that's my message on that. And that's kind of why we put together this resource guide. And you guys are a component of this resource guide. And for all of you who want this free resource guide, we'll have a form fill, link or whatever to it. You just fill it out and it'll get dropped right into your email. And it's like, if I was going to run a practice today, if I was going to open up a new practice, what resources would I use to have the optimally running practice? If you want to hear my point of view or my vision on that, our resource guide has all of this kind of broken down sequentially for you. It's pretty robust. Mike, my last question for you, and we'll wrap up this episode. Standing here today, we are in March of 2024, looking forward through the future, because you've done such an amazing job in the last, I would say, 18 months of wicked advancement and great new territory of innovation. What's next? What's coming to Prompt clinics across the country? Without sharing proprietary information or let the cat out of the bag, what's percolating over there in this brand new posh office you guys just moved into there in New Jersey? What do you got coming down the pipe that is just in the best interest of your clients countrywide?
I think AI has been the biggest buzzword of 2023 leading into 2024. But I am most excited about the application it's going to have for our clients clinically, on the admin side and the billing side. So we're looking at it all. We have an in-house team here in Jersey where their main priority is to pump out stuff that is surrounding AI. It's something you have to consider. It's moving so fast.
Yeah. And my understanding is you're considering a virtual attendant aspect to your game as well. I mean, from my numbers, that's a ginormous reach from clinics around the country. They're like, I need to automate.
Yeah, it's just getting rid of steps, getting rid of labor where we can.
Yeah, where you can, because the economy of scale is the net return we're looking for in the best interest of patient care, the group, and everything we already talked about. So, hey, man, fantastic news. Good stuff. I love the fact that you have such a young, vibrant team there, just looking for cutting edge challenges and things around the corner. So I'll let you I'm just going to let you have the last word here. And what advice would you have for people when they are looking for an EMR system? Let's leave people with advice, because I often tell people when you're looking for a business coach, you're looking for billing services such as ours. My advice to you is go in fully transparent about where you are and where you want to be, because in my world, transparency breeds trust. Find people that are fully transparent back with you and can actually give you the reality of what they do and how it can benefit you. But if you can't come in first, transparent about where you are, what your needs are, and where you want to be, the right person might not be able to help you. So that's my parting advice on our end. Mike, what's your parting advice to clients as they look to make a change in their EMR?
I guess two things, like complacency kills, and I think you always have to reevaluate how you're doing things. So most people don't want to switch EMR; it's a pain in the neck. But I think you have to reinvent yourself. You have to change your business, or else you're going to fall behind. And maybe that's your EMR. So I'd encourage you to look and evaluate processes on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think we've come together. We've got a data migration team now here at Meg, and our data migration team will take away one of the biggest fears of moving from one system to the next. Like, who's going to move all those accounts and all that data? We can literally help people with that. So if that's a concern of yours, don't let it be. You can literally have a team of people that just do that every day, day in and day out, do it for you. We do it a lot for people moving into prompt. So hopefully we can do it for you guys too who are listening. So that's it. Mike, thank you so much for your time. I'm very fortunate and very honored and blessed that you have given your time for my podcast. For those of you listening, I hope this was worthwhile for you to actually meet Mike, the head of the company. He's got a great team of partners. They're doing some great stuff. I know it sounds like I work for the company. I don't. We just have headed off for a lot of years, and I just want you guys to be well cared for and in the best hands possible. So that's it, everybody. YouTube podcast. We'll see you later. Click like and subscribe. Be a part of our team. Be a part of PTs helping PTs to live a better life of freedom. So that's it. Start each and every day expecting to do well. Bye, everybody.